Let's talk about a kingdom that was basically forged in blood. For 30 long years, England just tore itself apart. The crown wasn't a birthright, it was a prize you had to win on the battlefield. And then, one dynasty came along that didn't just win the crown. They completely changed the rules of the game forever. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll dive into the absolute chaos Henry VII inherited after the Wars of the Roses. Then we'll look at the genius toolkit he used to get the powerful nobles under control. After that, we'll see how his son, Henry VIII, had to deal with a totally new kind of threat. And finally, we'll see how all this created a massive shift in what rebellion even meant in England. You see, to really get how the Tudors built their power, you first have to understand the kingdom Henry VII won at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485. This was not some peaceful handover. It was a violent, broken country. I mean, for 30 years, the English crown was basically a hot potato being passed back and forth through one brutal battle after another. You can just see the instability here. Kings were being made and unmade constantly, and that sets a very dangerous precedent for anyone trying to take charge. And that's the absolute key to all of this. Winning one battle? That wasn't nearly enough. Henry VII had a famously weak claim to the throne, and he was up against these super powerful nobles with their own private armies who just spent the last 3 decades learning one lesson: violence works. This quote from a historian at the time just nails it. It really captures the paranoia Henry VII must have lived with every single day. The threat wasn't just some army across the sea. It could be the guy sitting next to him at the dinner table. Danger was literally everywhere. So how do you solve a problem like that? A paranoid king and a bunch of overly powerful nobles? Well, Henry came up with this masterful approach, a classic carrot and stick strategy to bring these guys to heel. He used this brilliant 2-pronged attack. On one hand, he offered incredible rewards for loyalty. On the other, he came down with crushing punishments for even a hint of treason. The whole system was designed for one thing and one thing only: absolute obedience. And this was his nuclear option. An act of attainder meant he could financially and politically ruin an entire family, strip them of everything they owned without even needing a trial. But here's the really clever part. He could also offer to reverse it if you promise to be loyal forever. This other tool was basically a form of financial blackmail. It put the nobility on a leash made of debt. Any misstep, any whisper of rebellion, and he could bankrupt them. It was a brutally effective way to keep them in line without having to execute everyone. And the result of all this? Look at that number: £110,000 a year. That's the carrot side of things. By grabbing land from traders and being incredibly shrewd with his finances, Henry nearly doubled the crown's income. And all that cash meant he could reward his friends with lands and titles, buying their loyalty. But he wasn't just fighting his enemies at home. No, he was playing chess on an international board. He built up a fantastic spy network and signed treaties that cut off his rivals from foreign support. He was systematically dismantling the Yorkist threat, piece by painful piece. So, by the end of his reign, Henry VII had pretty much done it. He had pacified the kingdom, he'd tamed the nobles, and totally neutralized the kind of dynastic challengers that had kept England in a state of chaos for decades. The father had solved the old problem of who gets to be king, but in doing so, he'd built this incredibly strong, centralized government, and his son was about to use it in ways that would create completely new, and you could argue even more dangerous problems. All right, so now Henry VIII steps onto the scene. He inherits this kingdom that's secure, it's wealthy, it's centralized. The old fight was over. His parents had already united the houses of Lancaster and York. But the very strength his father had built was about to spark a whole new kind of conflict. All of a sudden, this powerful Tudor state was getting into every corner of people's lives. We're talking heavy taxes for pointless foreign wars, resentment against powerful but low-born advisors like Thomas Cromwell, and then the big one, a complete religious revolution. The break with Rome and the destruction of the monasteries, which were the absolute heart of local communities. Suddenly, people weren't rebelling over who should be king, they were rebelling over what the king was doing. And this massive change all came to a head in 1536 with the Pilgrimage of Grace. This was the biggest rebellion of the entire Tudor era, and it's the perfect example of this new kind of opposition. The scale of this thing was just mind-boggling. 30,000 people. Henry VIII was facing a massive army. But here's the thing, it wasn't led by some rival with a claim to the throne. It was led by his own people, who were furious about his religious policies. And you just have to look at what they were demanding. It's a laundry list of policy complaints. It covers everything from religion and politics to the economy. This wasn't some sneaky Yorkist plot to grab the crown. This was a massive, popular protest against the government's actions. This really just sums up the whole transformation perfectly. Under Henry VII, a rebellion was a fight over who should be wearing the crown. By his son's time, it was a protest against what the government was actually doing. The whole game had changed. So what's the big takeaway here? Well, even though the last embers of those old dynastic wars were still flickering, and yeah, some historians will tell you the Yorkist threat didn't fully die out until 1521, the main threat had totally shifted. The new fires of religious and economic protest were already burning bright, and they would define a whole new era of rebellion. So, were the Tudors successful? Well, they did what no one before them could. They secured their family on the throne, and they ended the civil wars. But in creating a powerful central state to do it, they started interfering in people's lives, especially their faith, in ways no one had ever imagined. They didn't really end a rebellion. They just gave their people entirely new and deeply personal reasons to fight back.